welcome. I'm Noam. Good to have all of you here at this webinar. The second one I'm doing as part of the Genway Academy. This time we're talking about health and fitness a little bit, but also about using AI to do research. Before we jump into the actual content, I would love for you to write in the Q&A rather than the chat, because to your point, Martin, the chat is disabled. I'd love to hear about why you joined this session today and what are you most excited to hear about, learn about when it comes to AI and research. Very passionate about education around AI and research, about using Genway specifically, about this entire topic. So please feel free to use the Q&A and add your inputs. Why did you join? What do you want to learn? And any questions you have, both now and as we go through things, I am happy to share. If anything isn't working, feel free to let me know. I will address that. Let's get into the topics. I'll briefly cover what Genway is, why I partnered with them, and what's interesting to me about tools like Genway. But then we'll focus mostly on the research topic of the day and some statistics around who I researched. Then we'll talk about the 3x3, which is 3 insights I gleaned through using Genway and 3 takeaways that if I were an actual company in the fitness or the health space, I could use these takeaways very actionably to do something about. Then I'm happy to do a bit more of a deep dive into one of those insights and takeaways and show you a bit of the system and how I use it and how I think AI systems in general should be used these days. I have a few audio quotes around showcasing the experience interviewing with AI agents, and I'm not sure if the results will surprise you or not, but would love to share. And then Q&A, literally anything that comes to mind, anything you want to know about AI research, feel free. Please do add your questions. I'd be delighted to help. So let's start with Genway. I partnered with Genway fairly recently out of a great interest in where AI is taking the research realm. By research, I mean all forms of research and all teams, both insight generating functions and also other teams who are looking to glean insights from their users. Genway is an AI native tool where you can send an AI agent to conduct interviews for you. The 2 types of interviews you can do with Genway and that I've tried with Genway are what they call contextual interviews. These would be in-depth interviews into people's perspectives and experiences. The research I'm going to talk about today is that kind of research. And then the other type of research you can do with tools like Genway are usability studies. It's kind of interesting, right? It's not moderated, it's not unmoderated, it's moderated by AI. It's not humans, it's certainly not unmoderated. It's moderated by AI usability studies, which gives you the benefits of a moderated session where you can go into more depth, but also the benefits of an unmoderated session where you're not really limited by the scale you can do. So those are the 2 types of studies you can run on Genway. There may be more in the future, but these are 2 big buckets of work that we tend to do as researchers. I was selfishly very interested in the topic of health and fitness in 2025, just like I imagine pretty much everyone else. Once you reach the end of a year, you want to set some goals for your health, for your fitness. I also recently started a new role as the head of UX research at Zapier. I got this lovely benefit, this budget for health and wellness, and decided to buy an under-desk treadmill, which I'm not on right now. I think a lot of us are wondering about different trends in health, fitness, dieting, and supplements. What are people doing? What should I adopt? If I wanted to connect on a deeper level than a survey with a bunch of people and ask them about these things, As you know very well as research professionals yourselves, that would have taken a very long time. With Genway, it didn't. To give you some insight into the general topic and some statistics, I wanted to gain insight into people's training goals for 2025 and see if anything has meaningfully shifted from previous years to today. I wanted to ask people about popular exercise routines, but in particular, I was very interested because in tech, early adopter of technology, always keen to hear about how people are integrating technology into their fitness, into their diet. We have already conducted over 300 interviews in total, and that number isn't really capped. Besides the budget you're willing to spend, I chose two samples, a representative sample from the United States and a representative sample from the UK. I didn't sample people from other countries. Genway, as a tool, can conduct interviews in languages other than English. Many people in those countries speak English. Those were the people I interviewed. We got what Genway calls 80% engagement, which means that 80% of the interviews finished end to end. 20% did not complete what we defined as a full interview. The average length of an interview was 12 minutes. I designed an interview to be anything between 10 to 15 minutes, and we hit 12 minutes on average. And 15% of participants chose to extend the interview. Once Genway hit whatever predetermined time we've given the interview, it can offer participants to stay for a bit longer if they want to share any additional insights, and 15% of people elected to stay longer. Importantly, none of the people interviewed were professional athletes or fitness fanatics, which I hope is okay, and work out every single day, and they have strict diets and they're taking supplements. And I wanted people who were more like me, who care about their health, care about their fitness, but they're not professionals and they're not dedicated on a daily basis to going to the gym. They're just trying to stay healthy, and I was interested in that population. So those are the people who participated. If you just joined and missed the beginning, we have a Q&A feature in Zoom, which you can open. And I'd love to hear why you joined today, what you're interested in learning about specifically. And of course, if you have any questions for me, I would be delighted to share. Okay, so I wanted to share my 3x3 insights and takeaways. You might find this surprising, you might not, but these were very interesting to me. These are three fairly new trends that we're observing in the exercise world. This also gives you an idea of what sort of insights you can glean with AI-based tools. The first insight was there seems to be a very bullish sentiment with these participants on AI and its relationship to fitness. What I learned is that people feel like it's about time transition from simply monitoring our fitness, how many steps we took in a day, or what we ate in a day, maybe in terms of calories. And instead of just monitoring activity, get personalized suggestions on how to improve two different things. This was very interesting to hear. When I'm doing exercise, for example, I expect these AI fitness apps to help me improve the way I'm doing the actual exercise. If I'm cycling, I want it to suggest whether I should be investing more power in my pedaling. If I'm doing Pilates, I expect the app to be looking at me on the camera and giving me pointers on how to position my body more correctly. So within each exercise, people expect a lot more of apps than they did before. And then at the macro level, between exercises, people expect that the various metrics they have will impact the experience with the apps they use. For example, if I have a smart scale at home and it's measuring more than just my weight, but it's measuring things like my muscle mass, fat, and other metrics, then other apps connected to those smart weight metrics, people expect those apps to adapt based on those metrics and adapt programs. For those of you who've used apps like Peloton or other training apps, Nike training, then you know that basically up until now in most apps, you could choose a program, an 8-week program to run eventually 5 miles or whatever it might be. You would just go through the program. The program wouldn't be changed or adjusted based on what's going on in your body and with your health. Based on the insights I gathered, it seems like people are expecting something a bit different this time. So that was very interesting. The second insight was around people looking at fitness a lot more holistically than before, and also expecting more integrated technology. It felt to me like 2024 was a rough year for people. It was a rough year for me, so I can definitely understand that. What I was hearing from a lot of people, the dozens of people, if not hundreds, is a renewed appreciation for meditation, mindfulness, yoga, community activities, and adapting your diet to a proper fitness regimen. My takeaway from that is that fitness apps really have to start focusing a lot more on a more integrative approach, and they have to pull data from Apple, Google, or other platforms and create better dashboards so we have a good understanding of our health across physical activity, mental health, rest, diet. If you look at Apple Health today, it's still a fairly random collection of how many steps you've taken and sleep quality, although if you don't have something like the Aura Ring, then not quite sure how well it measures sleep quality. It's just a random bunch of metrics. And it sounded to me like people are expecting a much more integrative approach, and they want a dashboard where they can really look at their health and fitness a lot more holistically. Expectations are high. And then the third insight I chose for today was very interesting to me. I feel like in terms of diet, carbs have been the enemy of choice for many of us for a while now, such that even if you can eat gluten and you don't have certain health issues that restrict you from eating gluten, for many of us who were trying to keep a low carb or even no carb diet in order to either lose weight or stay healthy, that has been the trend. Interestingly, in this data set, it seems like there's been a shift in the conversation, at least from my perspective, from carbs as the enemy to protein as the friend. I interviewed non-professional athletes, people who don't go to the gym twice a day or live in the gym for hours each day or lift crazy weights or run ultra marathons, just regular people who go 2, 3, 4 times a week to the gym or do stuff at home, who try to get to 10,000 steps a day, and maybe sometimes they do and maybe sometimes they don't. These people talked a ton about consuming protein in different forms, using protein powders, protein shakes, taking supplements, taking creatine and other supplements I've never even heard about. All sorts of forms of magnesium came up. I was fascinated by this because it feels to me like most of the protein supplement product marketing is really still aimed at pro athletes and fitness fanatics. And it feels like there's a shift to a much broader audience, a lot more focused on what to add to your diet than what to avoid. So those are the 3 insights and 3 takeaways. I'm going to show you them all in a single slide. Please feel free to add your questions, and I'd be delighted to respond and help out. Insight number 1 is the sentiment around AI and fitness. Not surprisingly, it's been the year, or maybe a couple of years at this point, of AI madness. I do think that just like in any other field, including research, AI is taking over fitness and health. The takeaway from this is people are expecting a lot more within exercise and between exercise AI support. The second insight is about this holistic approach to fitness and incorporating all of those aspects into a more integrative dashboard and giving people better information around that. And then again, this third insight around a very intriguing shift in the conversation. Super interesting to me. And I think so that's that. I'm going to keep going for the time being. I wanted to do a deep dive into the protein example. I'm going to show a little bit on the slide and then move into Genway, the system, just to briefly show you how things work. At least the way I use Genway, I use it in 3 different ways when I'm analyzing a particular topic or theme. First of all, I review the high-level project insights and the sample interviews. What's an intriguing top insights, and what are the 3 to 5 interviews I can find straight away where the insight is emerging in novel ways. You'll see in a second that when I went into Genway after interviewing all of these people, I saw something come up around protein and supplements, and I chose to check it out. The second thing I like to do is within Genway as a system, you can either use regular tags in any given project, or you can create specific tags for a project. And then the system can go and auto tag any part of any interview with those tags. For example, if I have a tag around protein consumption or protein intake, the system will then go and tag all of the interviews and all of the parts of interviews where protein was mentioned. And then I can learn a lot more about those mentions and what's the context in which proteins are mentioned. And then the third tool is theme analysis, which is basically around the fact that you can use tags and keywords as a building block for broader topics. But when you really want to understand the themes and the main topics in your research, you need to use something more like theme analysis, where you get high-level themes and all of the subtopics that make up those themes. Hopefully you can see that. And what we're looking at now is this first step, the project insights. I have a project summary. It's telling me that people had a variety of fitness goals and diet and nutrition are playing a significant role. So that was my first clue that maybe something interesting is going on the diet and nutrition front, technology being seen as a valuable tool, etc. Below, I have all of the top insights that came out of this project, and there's increased interest in this, increased interest in that. What piqued my curiosity first is an increased focus on personalized diets and nutrition plans and everything to do with that. And I wanted to learn more about what people mean by that and what kind of food they're consuming. The next thing I tend to do is go to tags. I've played with this quite a bit, so these aren't the only tags I use, but just for the sake of the example, I have a tag group around diet, a tag group around goals, one around technology, one around exercise, and one around GLPs, which is one of the latest trends using semaglutide drugs like Ozempic or tirzepatide drugs like Mounjaro for weight loss, not just diabetes. So wanted to see if anything around that came up. Here I focused on diet, and I noticed that protein was mentioned quite a bit more than carbs, supplements, sugar, or anything else. If I click on protein, I can see all of the different interviews where anything to do with protein was mentioned. I can open any interview and read about how people are taking supplements, a high quality protein product or powder to help muscle recovery. Again, this was interesting to me because this sample was not a sample of people who I would imagine. It was very curious for me to see this. And it might be saying something about trends in supplements, diets, as I noted before. So this is the second place I go. In this screen, I can go through each individual interview if I want. I can see the interview summary. I can listen to the interview on audio. And in the future, I believe there will also be video if the participant turned their video on. And of course, there is video if you're doing usability testing. And then we have the full transcript of this conversation. So that's the second stage I talked about. And then the third stage is theme analysis. Basically, because you have an AI interviewer and they're not using a script, they're using general instructions. then some questions are asked in many interviews. It really depends. There are many questions that come up in most of the interviews, and then you can start seeing themes come up. Now, some of these themes, the system brought up organically. Other themes like protein intake, I brought up because I wanted to see what people are talking about in the context of proteins. And what you can see here is that when we look at something like protein intake, we have a bar chart with all of the subtopics that came up in the context of protein. We can also look at quotes around each of those subtopics to read up more on why are people consuming more protein? What's the goal? What types of protein are they consuming? Are they cooking these proteins or taking them as shakes? If I am interested in the topic of lean proteins and what that means and what people are cooking, I can click on lean proteins and look at all of these interviews and figure out what people are having and what they mean by lean. I guess this person is talking about fish, chicken, egg, and more egg. These are the 3 steps that I use to analyze and synthesize the data. Once I've looked at the interviews, the high-level insights, determined the tags that work for my project, I'll determine the themes, I can synthesize it into what I view as the top insight. This is very much a AI-human collaboration. It would be impossible for any of us in this webinar to review 300, 500, or 1,000 conversations. You have to have these tools to review all of this information. I'm going to move back to the presentation. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, criticisms, feel free to add them in the Q&A. Would love to hear from you. And if not, that's okay as well. We got a lot of feedback on the experience itself of interviewing with AI. It's something that I always ask in my projects because we're still pretty early in this, and I'm very curious to hear about how people experience an AI interviewer versus a human interviewer. Many people have never been in an interview experience. There is around a 95, 96% satisfaction rate with interviewing with AI, which means the vast majority of participants enjoy interviewing with AI. A general population sample reported that AI interviews are surprisingly good, fun, and even natural. We do get some negative feedback about these interviews, and usually they center around the fact that these interviews can feel a little bit less personable. And I think that might have to do with the fact that as of today, Genway and most companies I know in this area doesn't have any kind of avatar, human-like looking person talking to you. That might be a thing in the future, but right now, I don't think AI technology is quite ready for that. What we tend to see as participants is we hit the problem of the uncanny valley, which means that it looks almost right, but something's just a little bit off and it creeps people out and it's not a pleasurable experience. So instead of putting people through that experience, it's better to just do what Genway do. You can show people a logo or nothing at all and just have an audio-based conversation. All in all, 96% satisfaction rate. I hope you'll be able to hear this audio. Tell me if it works or not.
Really good. I'm always surprised by how well AI analyzes answers and structures its next question to what I've just said. It is pretty amazing.
I hope you could hear that. If not, let me know. This is a woman saying, it's really amazing. I'm always surprised by how AI structures its answers. Someone else.
It's been great. It's almost like I've been interviewed by a real human. So it's been a great experience.
It's great, almost like being interviewed by a human. Now, I'm curious to see how this evolves over time. I do think, being fair, that there might be some novelty effect here and that people are enjoying the novelty of AI. And of course, that could wear off at some point. At the same time, I imagine that until the novelty wears off, AI might also improve quite a bit. So the experience might even be better than it is currently. All I know is that participants, all in all, really enjoyed these conversations, which makes me happy. It's nice to not feel like people aren't enjoying them. I wanted to leave at least 10 minutes for any questions, points of interest. It feels like I have a shy crowd today without any in-depth questions, but I want to give people a chance. I'm seeing one name I know here, Francis. If you're listening and you're here, I'd love to, if you have any comments, feedback, questions that I can help with. Please forgive me, the rest of you, if I don't know your name. It's not personal, but I just happen to know Francis, and we've spoken fairly recently, right, Francis? Good to see you here. For everyone else, feel free to ask whatever. I'll wait a couple more minutes, let people formulate any questions. Until people do, I'll just say that I'm planning more webinars like this with other types of research, other topics, and I'd be happy to cover anything that interests people. The more feedback you provide and the more you share, the better I can structure these webinars. Just wanted to say that. Okay, so Francis, thank you for the question. Francis is asking, can you talk a bit about the time it took end to end, where you spent the most time prepping to ensure success, etc.? Absolutely. I have a YouTube video already live on Genway's YouTube. I invite you to search for Genway AI on YouTube and check it out if you want. I made a how-to video about how to set up a study in Genway. And Francis, my thesis about how research is changing, how our role is changing and evolving, one of the most important roles we already have and will continue to have when it comes to AI native tools like Genway is, to your question and to your point, the inputs we give to the system to make sure the project is successful. The way Genway works in particular is that the system has a framework called Craft with AI, in which you answer 5 questions, 4 of which are mandatory and the 5th is not, in order to start any project. Those 5 questions are very similar to what we would put in any regular old research plan in Google Doc or whatever, Coda, whatever you use. The first question is around the background, the context to the project, etc. The second question is around the topics, the research questions, like what do we need to be learning here? The third question is about what does success look like? What are the critical insights we're trying to glean for this to be considered a successful project? The fourth question is about the sample, giving the system context on who it's talking to. The fifth question is our opportunity as the human overlords of the AI system to give Genway any additional specific guidelines that might make the research more successful, higher quality, etc. I'll say that final question about specific suggestions, I typically only fill that out once I've run a pilot with the system and I learn about little errors or things that it's leaving out or places where it's not putting enough emphasis. And then I can correct that behavior by changing the specific guidelines or by changing my answer to one of those 4 other foundational questions within the Craft with AI framework. Up until recently, we had to craft all of those questions and answers to the Craft with AI framework by ourselves. But what Genway put in place, which is kind of cool, is a custom GPT. If you've ever used those on OpenAI, it's a Genway custom GPT where you can put in your research topic. And I tried this. I put in, I want to know more about health and fitness trends in 2025. And then the GPT outputs all of the responses to the 5 foundational Craft with AI questions for you. rather than starting with the blank page problem where you know what you want to learn about, but you can't really think of the exact questions or how to define success. So the way this helps you is it just solves that blank page problem and it gives you a template to work with. So I did that. First of all, I used the GPT. I then customized my project and it took me between 30 minutes to an hour to tweak everything the way I wanted it. I piloted the project in two ways. First, you can create synthetic data by letting an AI interview another AI and look at that transcript, which works okay. But I also think it's critical to go through a demo where you, the human, are being interviewed by the system. So I did that. Once I went through an interview, I had some remarks, some edits to make. So I edited my project and did that a couple of times. So that's maybe another hour and a half of work. So maybe a total of an hour and a half or 2 hours of work at most. And then I launched the project. I launched the project using Genway's built-in recruiting. You can access a panel through Genway and choose characteristics you want. Language, geography, employment, age, other demographics, use of technology, interests like fitness and health, etc. Defining my sample, I don't know, was maybe 5 minutes of work, 10 minutes of work. And then everything in terms of recruiting and in terms of interviewing is a few hours or a day at most until you have hundreds of responses to your research. And of course, you can recruit using your own participant sample. So that's obviously an option as well. And then in terms of analysis, I went through that 3-step process, which I like to go through, of going through project level insights, tagging, theming, and kind of putting all of that together. I want to say maybe half a day at most in order to get to the quality of insights I was looking for. In this project, I'm trying to feed my own curiosity, but I did want to pretend I'm in the shoes of someone who is a product manager in a fitness app or a product marketing manager at a company that makes protein powders, and see if I can get to insights that would be really helpful and actionable for them. I didn't showcase all of the insights I came to in this presentation, just 3. There were many more. Let me know in the Q&A if that answered the question well enough, and if there's any follow-ups. We're going to be finished in a couple of minutes, but I'm happy to stay a little bit longer or answer any follow-ups you might have. You're very welcome, Francis. Unless there are any other burning questions, we might end here. For any of you watching either live now or the recording later, please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn or email me if you want to chat about Genway, AI research, about any of this. I'm always happy to have conversations and delighted to be part of this amazing community that we have and just learn together about how to use a tool like Genway to do better research. So anyway, for all of you here, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And wherever you are, I hope you have a good evening, a good night, a good day. Cheers. I will hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.